Hello, everybody. I'm Nine with Brad from Sanctuary, and we're here with Mike Swanson. Mike, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you've worked on in the past?
My name is Mike Swanson. I am currently at Sony Santa Monica as one of the art managers there, and just finished working on God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, which is a DLC to God of War Ragnarok. Um, Previous to that, I've been in the industry. I'll just say this: I've been in the industry for about 30 years now. I think that's sort of the long and short of it. So I'm a veteran, I think you would call, of the industry. Um, Started roughly the same time as someone that you guys know, Chris Taylor. We both started at Electronic Arts Vancouver, and I started out as an artist, kind of worked my way up to lead artist, art director, and then art manager. And then I took some producer positions, executive producer positions, and kind of went all over the place. And now I'm back managing art, and that's kind of my love. And that's probably where I will die in this industry is still managing artists and getting artists, to do their best. Um,
Cool. And we're particularly interested in RTS games. Can you tell us about which ones of those you've worked on?
At Gas Power Games, I worked on, Supreme Commander Forged Alliance. I think, I worked on all of the games there. As the art manager, I was working on all the games at Gas Power, but then there were a couple of games that I jumped in as the producer, and that was Space Siege, if you guys remember that one, and then Supreme Commander 2. And so I was the producer Supreme Commander 2, and then also the producer and executive producer on the Age of Empires Online, that was the last game that Gas Power did before Wargaming bought it, and
Hmm.
I had left Gas Powered just before Wargaming bought it, and then I went to join Relic, working on their last Warhammer game. So
Right.
yeah,
Okay,
so
cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you've certainly had lots and lots of experience. We just wanted to show you Sanctuary a little bit. We've been working on it for a few years now.
yeah.
Um, so what happened was long, long ago is I interviewed the Subcom dev team, including yourself and about I think five other people, and
Hmm.
there was no real purpose to that. I was just really interested, and know the community was interested. But what it turned into was talking about how to build an RTS today because technology has changed so much since
Hmm.
Subcom was released, and it became apparent that a small team on a small budget could like make one. And once that became obvious, like a whole bunch of people just banded together and wanted to actually do it. And like I say, we've been doing it for a few years now. It's coming along,
Yeah.
and we just wanted to show you, a couple of slides about where we're at and get your
Sure.
thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So I'll just run you through a few slides about what we've been up to in the last 3 years or so. Essentially, we're making an RTS game called Sanctuary Shattered Sun, right? Here's a bunch of things that we're interested in having in there. So, it's a strategy game, right? In real time, it's got lots of units. It's got strategic zoom, which means you can zoom out to see the whole map. You can zoom in to see an individual unit, right? It's got order queuing. You can queue up all the types of orders you want, move them around, things like that. We're focusing on macro and not micro. We're simulating the combat. So all the projectiles, all the laser beams and the missiles, if they
Hmm.
hit something along the way, they hit that. They're not on rails and things like that. And our
Right.
economy is also one of those traditional sort of things where it's got two resources, right? It's flow, it's not an instant cost kind of thing. We'll have the ability to harvest dead trees and dead units and things like that, and you can build quickly if you want with multiple engineers at once and things like that. And we'll have a commander king piece kind of thing which you can upgrade over time, right? We've got
Hmm.
mod support, right? That's really important for us, and we've already got like a prototype map editor. So we're trying to make this RTS which will really stand up to the test of time. It's got some long legs on it and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So it's set on the surface of a Dyson sphere, right? Which is this giant structure that's hollow inside. It's built around the sun, right? And the idea was it was built to be habitable, right? And so you get these sort of like really huge proportions of scale where, you get these mountain ranges, which are actually just structures, right? All the infrastructure is in there. You know, these giant things, and then the units are on there, right? So you're like tiny little ants crawling on the map, really just
Uh-huh.
getting that sense of scale, right? Which also ties together sort of our story, the setting, right? It explains a
Yeah.
lot of things, just sort of pretty unique, right? So, gameplay wise, it's a real-time strategy game, right? You can zoom in and out. Here's like two factions taking it over each other, fighting each other, right? Each of these projectiles is a real thing that you can sort of move around, right? And then you zoom out and you get your strategic icons, right? You get your range rings and you get hundreds of units, right, on the map at the same time. No problem. We could go up to a few thousand units as well if we wanted to, right? So. And then we add a bunch of candy, right? So one thing we wanted to do is because Sanctuary is, an artificial planet, right? We wanted to sort of have a bit more active participation of the map itself in the game, right? So it's not
Yeah.
just this sort of static backdrop, it's actually more dynamic and more active, right? Almost
Mhm.
like another player. And so one of the things you could do is if there's a giant structure, you could actually blow it up and then it collapses and it forms it blocks the path, or, it even forms a bridge or a valley, something like that, right? And obviously, why stop there? Because it's all an artificial planet. That means the weather on it is also artificially generated, right? It's maintained. And so if you destroy some of this weather machinery, there's cooling coils and things like that.
Okay,
You
okay.
actually will be able to freeze the entire map at once, right? So your tanks are now like able to drive over the ice, and the ships are stuck in the frozen oceans, right? And then if you
Uh-huh.
repair the weather infrastructure, right, you can actually all your tanks will sink into the sea, right? And where we were going with this, obviously, that's just one of it, but like the next level is why stop here when we can blow up the map itself, right? So if you launch the most powerful weapons because it's hollow, right, you actually blow up the ground and then it falls
Right.
down and the sun is below, right? So all the units fall into the sun, which isn't just a gameplay gimmick, right? It ties into this sort of making the map more active
Yeah.
theme that we've got going, because now you need to walk around it, right? It's changed the topology of the very map itself, right? You can't just walk there anymore. The map is completely different in a certain sense, right? And we'll have giant units like this, right? So this is actually well, we just keep adding a number every time we call it. This is a tier 40 unit or something, right? Which would just
Mhm.
be able to stomp through enemy bases.
Yeah.
And it's just like as big as a mountain itself. And when you build one, well, maybe it's the end of the game. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
going to end one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and then we'll just get to like the factions. So just sort of we got three factions in our game, right? And they're all kind of based around the exploration of what is it like different to be like different natures of intelligence, right? So this is the human faction, right? They're the Earth Defense Alliance. All the other planets have been disassembled to
Hmm.
build Sanctuary, which is the name of the Dyson Sphere. It's also the name of the
Okay.
game, right? And these guys are actually in a frozen Earth now because all the sun's blocked. So the Earth is cold, right? And they're not happy about it, right? And they're sort of like blocky and things like that. And then the second faction is the Chosen. These guys have actually uploaded themselves into the virtual world. They're humans who live in that virtual world, and they're sort of fighting for the control of the Dyson Sphere because from their perspective, right, a fake like virtual reality is as good as real reality. So the way to deal with that is why doesn't Sanctuary become a giant supercomputer, right? It doesn't need trees because we could put trees on the inside, right? And all the
Uh,
physical people are unhappy about that, right? And here's how they look, right? Here's that T40 unit, sort of towering above, right? And while they were fighting over this, we have the third faction, which is the Guard. They're the worker robots, the sort of system that built Sanctuary itself. They're these self-replicating machines, and during some events, right, they got separated from this giant network that is Sanctuary because it's a machine world, really. And now they're sort of becoming conscious, right? So it's like, what is an artificial intelligence really? And they just woke up and their priority is to, stop the combat, to stop further damage to the Dyson Sphere, but they might have disagreements on what the best way of doing that is and what that even means and things like that.
Mhm.
So here's some of their units. We got some big units, some factories, aircraft, etc.
Mhm.
This is one of my favorite stories, actually. So on the left is sort of our tank level of detail, and on the right is what 100,000 trees looks like. And that's running at 70 frames a second.
Oh wow.
And it's
Is
actually a
that
funny story because, yeah, go on.
is that in Unreal? Is that
No, no, this is Unity.
this is Unity? Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
Impressive.
well, we got it going fast because actually it's funny because Unreal Engine 5 came out at the time and they were saying, oh, you can do 100,000 trees. That was like a YouTube video. And our technical artist said, well, I'm kind of skeptical that it's all that amazing. I bet we could do it. And an hour and a half later, he shows us this, which is 100,000 trees rendering at once.
Oh
So
wow.
apparently a good team can do anything. So there we go.
Uh-huh.
We don't need that many trees, but
Right.
we're gonna use what we got. Yeah, and then next, here's what our environment's starting to look like, right? We've got this tech which makes it look like it goes on forever and ever. The map just keeps going. You won't be able to play forever and ever, but you're still a playable area. But in terms of visuals, it sort of completes a lot of maps in older RTS games and things, Command and Conquer and stuff like that. They have borders and they
Yeah.
end, whereas
Fog of
ours look
War.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we have sort of semi see-through fog of war, right, which t
Mhm.
turns into this kind of mist, and you
Right.
could just admire the maps and stuff, right? We're gonna have some pretty cool environments. These are sort of the standard environments, right? But we're thinking, what if there's a fully machine environment or an environment where the algorithms went wrong and instead of putting in human life, like plant life and stuff, it put in alien stuff instead, right? So it's
Mhm.
totally weird, or it's just like made entirely out of fiberglass or something. You can make some really unique and bizarre things going on in there, right? And then here's some just more pictures. That's actually we've seen this guy before, but we got some ships. We're thinking about putting in these bridges, which you'd be able to like collapse and then possibly
Right.
repair, right? Here's a bit of a desert map. This is an oasis kind of view, right? Yeah, and then we went to PAX last year in Australia, right? So,
Ah,
and people were just going crazy. I know, Mike, if you want to talk about this because you were there. The Australians went to PAX, we didn't, the Australian part of our team.
Yeah, so PAX went for 3 days. It had about 100,000 people. I don't know exactly how many, maybe 90,000.
mhm.
And people just loved it, right? So we had like people walking past all day, gathering around, and it was really interesting because like everyone wants a new RTS. That was overwhelmingly clear, right? People just want more RTS games, and they kept saying, "Why don't people make them? Where are they? Give me one. Give me anyone." But they liked our one
Mhm.
as well. The other thing that was really interesting is that some people had never seen strategic zoom before. In fact, lots of people hadn't. So
Oh wow.
that was a bit of a surprise, and people just loved us instantly for that, right? Because they'd never seen it before, and they just thought we were geniuses. And the other people who had seen it before, they'd like played Supreme Commander before or whatever, and they just loved it because they want another Supreme Commander game type
Oh
game
yeah.
to play. So either way, the reactions were just like spellbound. People are just like, "Wow, this is so cool." And we had like people just say, "Oh, this is so cool. This is the coolest game I've ever seen. I really want to play it. I want it." Blah blah blah. And we'd be like, "Oh yeah, have you seen the shatter thing?" And they're like, "What?" And then we'd play the thing where the missile comes in, blows up parts of the map, and it all like earthquake happens, and it all
Yeah.
falls in. And they thought they were in love before that, but after they'd see that, their just like mouth would be on the floor, and they'd be like, "Oh my God!" And it
Yeah.
was just really really fun. And
Yeah.
it seems to have done us a lot of good because we have like analytics and stuff, and we can see our growth. And actually, after PAX, our growth has changed a lot, and it was actually quite a big surprise to us because we probably maximum we could have spoken to about 500 people while we're there in 3 days with 3 people. But
Hmm.
it's made a big difference. So that's why we're going to PAX in Boston in a month,
And
just
yeah,
to see if we can replicate that. And you get all the business connections and all that sort of stuff as well.
right. There's
Mm.
also reporters there, right? And
Yeah.
although I know the online reporting has been so many layoffs even on the game magazines, but yeah, you touch on a couple of good reporters or good magazines, and that's really going to get your reach out there.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And I guess that's it. We flew through that presentation. That's us. Here's a picture of Dyson Sphere to finish.
Yeah,
There you
yeah, that's
go. Got
awesome.
a giant hole in it.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting, with the the Dyson Sphere here is you know uh I was thinking about like the oceans on it, right? Like the oceans can't be that deep if it's a sphere that you can kind of break through. Is
Yeah.
that do you guys have because you guys have water in the game, but I guess it's more,
Yeah, we do. We do. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, because like I mean, there's two answers to that. There's a story answer and there's a technical answer. So in the technical answer, like you make the map, right? And then the map sits on top of the flat mechanical layer, and then it's
yeah,
whatever the max depth of the map is whatever it is,
yeah.
right? So the mountains would be deeper, the oceans would be a lot thinner, because there's a layer of soil on top of the mechanical layer, right? The lore answer is, well, nothing stops you from like varying the thickness of this thing, right? You could have
Uh,
sections which are multiple kilometers deep, right? We actually wanted to have like a mechanical map where, you're fighting inside this
oh yeah,
surface,
you
right?
break
You're in
down
the deeper
inside, go down
section,
into that
right? And
hole.
it's like
Yeah,
mechanical and you're actually below the ground level, right?
yeah.
But like the just the cavern is so large that you could fit the entire strategic zoom thing in that inside a
Mhm,
space inside that, right? Because it's quite literally astronomical proportions, right? So I
mhm,
like we worked this out. Like this one, like it's all physically sort of plausible, right? You can't make a material this strong, but you can do it with like some clever use of physics and stuff,
mhm.
right? Real physics. And like this thing is actually like 4% of the distance from like the Earth to the sun. It's like
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So yeah, it's absolutely enormous. It's
It's
like,
also a
I
game, and it doesn't really
yeah,
matter. Like, I mean, people take
yeah,
it seriously. We've got like math people on the, our Discord, because we've got, you know, a lot of people in our Discord talking
yeah.
about this, and they're like, no, the gravity would be this because of this, and they're like, working it all out, taking it very
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah, I mean, most of the images I've ever seen of like Dice Sphere have been kind of more, framework stuff around. So I really like this where you guys are going like, yeah, like what happens if it's kind of this planet thing, around it. Um, but yeah, yeah, no, I love where you guys are going with this.
Well,
Yeah,
for
the
me,
only,
the bit that I like about it, sorry, but just quickly, I like how we have the contrast between like organic, natural looking stuff and totally mechanical sci-fi, having them both,
yeah,
and you can just play with different mixes of that over and over
yeah,
again.
totally. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's a very cool thing. And yeah, and it's also, I mean, obviously Supreme Commander was what, like 2008, or even earlier, I think. And yeah, we were limited in what we could put on those maps, right? The maps were pretty flat, a couple of trees here and
yeah,
there, right? Yeah, having stuff on the map that also changes as you're battling, I think is a very, very cool thing. And yeah, it's hard for me to think like what was the last our big RTS game that came out. Uh I think some
Well,
of I think
Planetary Annihilation was big. Um,
yeah, that was big. And then there, Dawn, I think it was the Warhammer one from Relic. That was pretty big. I think the problem was that, it was an enormous team on it. And so
yeah,
yeah, I think that's the but now, like you guys are right. Like you can make games with much smaller teams now, right? With the tools that are available, in Unity, and then Unity probably has a ton of plugins, right? And yeah, I mean,
Well,
it's
Unity
not
does
bugs.
have lots and lots of stuff, but we found we haven't been able to use much of it because our performance goals are so high that
Yeah.
all the off-the-shelf stuff doesn't cut it. Like, for example, that tree stuff, that's totally custom code that we've written. It's not
Oh
like
wow.
Unity's doing that. It's our shader that we wrote in our imposter
Okay.
system and this, that, and the other. So, uh, the one thing we use from Unity a lot is that dots coding stuff that they have. I don't know if you've heard
Hmm.
about that, but that's like super performant code that's really a lot harder to write than normal code, but you can, we once had 50,000 tanks on a battlefield all shooting at each other, blowing each other up, and don't think that's going in the game because it's not, but that's what dots can do. It can do
Uh,
that.
you
It's
can do
pretty
that.
amazing. We can't
Right.
get that to work over the network though, but the CPU
Right.
can do that. Dots is amazing. So we use that. We use some other things, but we're definitely having to push the boundaries of what vanilla Unity can do.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. And imagine the players. Just come back to me. They usually want more units. Probably if you were to say, do you want more
Yep,
units, pretty trees? I'm sure they're going to go more units. Right. It's all about that game.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
you were talking
and how,
Yeah.
about the flat maps before. I really like the subcom maps because, well, at the scale that we're talking about, you kind of want lots of big open areas. You don't want
it's got to be easy to read, right? You got to know, and I
yeah,
think especially when you got that many units, you want to know which units are yours and what are the enemies, right? So that's why you usually go
Yeah.
with just kind of these primary colors, right? And yeah, because there's nothing worse than having your units get lost.
and you don't want them to get tripped up like navigating around tiny little cliffs and
Yeah,
stuff. You don't want to have like a little obstacle. You just want to have like a
yeah,
mountain range, right?
yeah. And,
Yeah.
and plus, my experience, playing the multiplayer games is, you use those obstacles to your advantage. And, again, like if you have a mountain range, maybe you have some units that can fire just over the peak, but no higher. And yeah,
Yeah.
but that's how many players in it, like I'm sure you guys have multiplayer, right? Like how many
Yeah,
players
yeah.
do
So we're aiming for now 8, but really it's like how many connections can you put in, right? It's however many, right? So right, we're sort of designing for 8, but then you can go up to like later, when we, make sure it's all good and stuff, right? You could go up to 10, 16, whatever, right? Like probably up to 16 because we've seen mods for Supreme Commander add up to 16 players and right. But
Well,
that like
and we've
old,
tried over that, and it gets really stupid. Like 16 is a huge amount. Even 10, right? You don't need more than 10. You don't
yeah,
for a fun game. See, that's the other thing. Like one is like, what
true.
can the tech do, and the other one is like, well, what's fun? And yeah, but
yeah,
for us, the challenge with this project is actually the upload speed of people's internet connections. So the more players you have, the more you have to upload. So it does make
yeah,
there is a barrier there. So 10
Yeah.
is a nice number.
yeah. There's always
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Some of the previous RTS games I've worked on, there was a feature that we'd always talked about, but we never were able to do that. It's kind of a king of the hill or eternal war, right? Where there's just an eternal battle that you could just open up, jump into. So it's not like, hey, I gotta wait for all these other players to
Yeah.
line up.
Yeah.
Like it's always going on, right? It's
But
sort of cat.
how would that work if like you were, well, there's some guys done really well and he's got like really high tech stuff and you just enter as a player. How do you have any chance of fighting that guy?
You need
Yeah, well,
reinforcements. You need a bunch of
yeah.
air transports to carry a pile of
Well,
tanks with
I, th
you,
I think
right?
that's
Like,
where I think that's where you go. Like in some of these other games I played. Like I don't know if you've ever played like Risk. I've had friends
yeah.
who are just always, way too good, right? And so what you had to do is you had to align yourself with another player to take them down, and then you'd battle that player at that point, right? So I think sometimes if you have that king of the hill, I think sometimes it is really good to have a person who is really good, and then you join forces with some other factions and try and take them down.
Yeah. Well, do you mean there's just one battle going on one map, or do you mean that there's like 1,000 battles going on 1,000 maps and you can?
There's
pick.
one battle
On
Yeah.
one map, yeah. Yeah. We actually have a better chance of supporting that because one decision we made early is to not go for a fully lockstep game. And part of that is to help allow, reconnection. So you don't have to re-simulate the game state right from the beginning. So, potentially like further down the line when we develop it, right, you could see a 3 month long game and people just continuously jump in and send,
Yeah,
just jump into the armies, right? And then it's whoever can hold on the longest, right?
yeah,
Kind of thing. It could be super fun, right? Yeah, which is also why we're limited by bandwidth because we sort of made the decision that in lockstep games, the trouble is when you have 16 players on the map, what is the chance that one of them has a high ping or a slow PC? It's close to 100% at this point, right? And so rather than doing like a fully sort of peer-to-peer system, we're doing like a client host kind of thing, right? Which means that only that guy will be slow and the game will be hosted on the fastest guy's
right.
computer, right? So
Yeah.
with the best internet, and that way it can actually run a lot faster for everybody, right? And be more stable. So thanks to that, we can like have a much smoother player experience in these larger games, right? And you could do this kind of reconnection thing later on and stuff.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and what Mike was alluding to there was let's just go on a picture of the Dyson Sphere. So one thing we're thinking about and we've always really wanted to do is, well, you've got this giant sphere, so why not have a giant battle across the entire surface of it, right? So imagine like a Total War style thing where you have like all
Yeah.
these little zones and each one of those is a map, right? And you can join in and you fight on that map, right? And then if you join the faction, right? And the faction might have 500 dudes in it, right? And you're all working together to try and take control over all of the territories on the
Yeah.
sphere, right? And you can send each other reinforcements. You can join as a team, like, form a group of four faction
Yeah.
mates and attack an area, right? And things like that. And we've actually seen like and even tested in some cases on it was like that game mode in Supreme Commander Forged Alliance Forever, right? So that was made back in 2014 and it worked for a bit, but then there was some server issues, right?
That
So
was
we
made by the
actually,
players. That wasn't made
yeah,
by
exactly.
GPG. We
Yeah.
added that to the base game over the top. Unfortunately, that got lost, which seems crazy now because it was such a
Oh
cool
no.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I like the idea of the in some cases, I don't know whether you're alluding to this, like the world itself is kind of the UI, I don't know,
yeah,
imagine like kind of like planetary annihilation, right? You can spin it around and go, hey, there's a 4-player game, there's an 8-player game,
Right.
but it's this sort of battle for this area, and I can join that rather than, again, most of the games are like, hey, set up a multiplayer game, wait till everybody joins, and then you get in. I think that's why it's kind of alluding to like this sort of like eternal battle. Like you can go in and people are already playing and you can join in. I think like like you're saying is that yeah, there's going to be you know someone's going to have higher rank units, in there, right? They're going to get a little bit of an advantage, but I think a lot of games already have that where people,
yeah, yeah,
people,
yeah, yeah. And the not the original, but like the older version of this that was in modded into Forged Alliance, right? It was designed to be unfair. So you could just do a 3 versus 2, a 4 versus 1, or whatever, right? And it just depended on strategy. And the elite players, they got experience and they got promoted and they got access to higher tier reinforcements. They could bring in all the awesome units, whereas if you're
Yeah,
just
but
a
there
rank
was
of fire
major
soldier.
plot flaw in it though, because you could possess a piece of land and it would get invaded, and then all your
Yeah.
stuff is wiped. That makes no sense whatsoever. You have to start from
Nah, it was
scratch
great.
everything.
It was great. It was amazing. And I think where this is going is like it didn't need to be fair, right? Because you could do these things and it was sort of balanced through having the cost, right? Because you just spent all these reinforcements and you just bought them, but now you can't use them on a different game and so on. And you had like the top tier players, they would gift the new players all their tanks and actually have this like really social thing going on where like a new
Uh-huh.
player would be trained by the top guys because there's so many newbies, right? And if you train them all up, then your faction can win and you can actually take over the entire sphere. And it was like a
Yeah.
season that was 3 months long or something.
Yeah.
It was roughly like that, right? And
I
then yeah, there
remember
was
I remember
like
I remember playing a
yeah,
game a long time ago. I don't know if you guys remember this one. It was called, I think it was called Backyard Monsters, and I think it was a
right.
Zynga, Zynga game. And it was 2D, but it was kind of exactly what you're describing. Like when I went in there, I had people, hey, Mike, join our faction. I didn't have very many units, and they had the really strong ones, but they taught me how to, go to battle, and they gifted me things like you said, and it was really social, and it's funny, like I'm friends with these people still on Facebook, like years later, just because we spent a couple of months trying to take over the whole map. And I think, one of the things I learned when I was coming from North America and I went to Europe, to Berlin to work at Big Point there. I was learning about some other European game companies, like I think it's Good Games as well. And they did have this notion, and it really scared the hell out of me because they're like, yeah, they have these big battles where people will lose everything. And it's kind of done by monthly, right? And I'm like, oh, that's horrible, right? You spend this money and you lose all your units. But that game was super successful, and the people loved it for that. And I'm trying to remember what I think it was kind of more of, like you say, like this Total War kind of game. But it was 2D. And but
Yeah.
I remember like thinking like, oh, okay, like in Europe, it just seemed like they were more attuned to actually, losing everything and being fine with it. It was just the fun of it, was the social.
Yeah,
uh
yeah. I mean, just to be clear, we're not playing on like microtransactions or something like that,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah, there's no,
so
I mean,
like,
there's no pay
yeah,
to win, right? So yeah,
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 yeah.
exactly. So with us, it would be like, but you'd still lose all your progress. So, and in fact, that's what happened with the old, like massive multiplayer mode, right? You ranked up and you needed battle experience, right? You needed
Yep.
like 50 battles or like, a
Mhm.
bunch to rank up. And so if your character died, that's it, right? And you had a recall mechanic, so you could evacuate the dude while if you're losing a battle, you could if and you had enough time, you could evacuate and save your life, right? You'd lose the
Uh-huh.
battle, but you'd be okay, right? But if you got killed before you could make it out, right? That's it, right?
Yeah, it's pretty
So
epic
as
stuff.
a yeah, it's
As a
like
layer on top.
yeah, like
Yeah.
edge of the seat moments, right there, where like a top player comes in, right, and then like four new players come in and they've been trained on how to like snipe the guy, how to
Yeah.
make sure he dies, right? And they've got the special reinforcements designed to like kill him
Hmm.
really quickly, not win the battle, just get rid of that guy. And then
Right.
yeah.
Hey,
Well,
Brad, I was
if I remember in Supreme Commander, the head would pop off. Like you could pop your head off as
yeah.
kind of
Yeah,
this
that was
last
Supreme Commander
digit.
2, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you had very little chance of success, but every now and then I'd be playing someone, they were able to build their bases back up with just their, commander head. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that.
Hey, Brad, I was thinking you should talk about the faction abilities like armor, shield, transmitter.
All right, yeah, yeah. Keep forgetting about that. So one thing we want to add is we want to because we've got three factions, right? We want to make them quite different from each other, right? So
Mm.
um right, and so the one way the trouble is we want to have like the ability to really like collaborate with your team members. So you can just give units to them, right? You can share units between each other. A lot of RTSs don't let you do that. They don't let you just do that, right? So and that brings an issue in terms of gameplay, which is if you have a really good faction that's good at tanks and then you have a faction that's good at artillery, you just take both of the units from both factions and now you have the best tanks and the best artillery, right? That you win, right? So in order to avoid that, we had some clever designs where like giving a unit doesn't really give you an advantage. So for
Mm.
example, power generators, right? No matter how good it is, it's still like it doesn't make your other power generators better. It's just a really good power generator, right? So, and in that vein, right, we're introducing these sort of mechanics like an armor mechanic. So the EDA, they have all really armored units. And when we mean all really armored, we mean every single unit, including the engineers, the power generators, the buildings, right? They have this armor which is extra HP essentially, but you can repair it quickly at a low cost, right? So if you wanted to make your units survive longer, you just spend a little bit more, right? And likewise, the other factions have a similar unique mechanic to them, right? Where like the Chosen, they have personal shields on every unit, and they have these little shield booster drones. We've got drones in our game, which are these non-controllable kind of units that are able to interact with each other, but you don't control them directly because they're too small and fiddly, right? So you have these drone controllers around the place, and so for the Chosen, they would among other things, they'll be able to like boost like repair the shields better, right? And then the Guard have a really cool mechanic, which is they have like these little antennas on their units and stuff, right? And then when they're in range of a transmission signal, right, they can get the high bandwidth signal across, so they get larger vision radius and things like that, right? So and obviously, right, and that means you can't mix it between the factions because your guard unit will boost your allies if they're also a guard, but an EDA doesn't have the antennas on it, so they can't use this mechanic, right? And that's how we sort of solve this in a quite neat way, right, without like artificially limiting. Because really, what we want to do is we want to like give players the creativity, like the room for their own tactics and strategies, right? If you want to right? If you want to defend against an enemy attack with a power generator, that's fine, right? Like that's your choice. And if you find a cool way of doing these things, right, you're on it, right? So yeah, so and then back to the drones, right? So like there are these little units like over here, right? These are the construction drones and stuff, and you'd actually be able to shoot them down. There are these combat drones which can shoot each other and they can shoot other drones. And there's these really powerful like anti-drone weapons, right, which just like blanket the area and they destroy all the drones around them. But drones, they can do all these different things. Like these ones can build. There's other ones which create a fake radar signature and they follow your units around in formation. So they look exactly like normal units on the radar because they're in formation. But, when a projectile comes, there's nothing there. It's just a drone, right? So, right. And then there's other ones which can repair armor panels or like do other things as kamikaze drones and like we're thinking about all these kind of things, right? So that kind of adds like this layer,
But the
a
difference
little bit of
between the
can I ask
factions.
oh,
Sorry, Mike, you
oh,
go.
yeah, go on.
yeah, I was just gonna ask, like, are these the different drones with different like when you have one faction, do you have a couple of different types of drones
Yeah,
that
yeah. You've got a couple of different types of drones. So there's like some anti-air combat drones, there's some kamikaze drones, some
oh,
construction drones. Those are to sort of like, two or three factions could have those, right? But then they also have some unique drones. So the Guard has these like, fake radar signature drones. Only
hmm
the Guard gets them, right? And the EDA gets armor repair drones and things like that. So
right.
right? There's some overlap, right, between the types, but we're sort of thinking like 5 or 6 different types of drones,
Yeah, so all the
right? And
factions will like have similar
yeah,
stuff, but with some deviation. So they'll have the same basic unit roster, but with
yeah,
tweaks along the way. But the main difference in the play style between the factions is EDA has the armor, Chosen has the shields, and Guard has these transmitter things that give buffs to things like vision. And because of that fundamental difference, you'll actually play with them a little bit differently to each other. And that's our
yeah,
hope, or that's where we're taking it, so that the factions aren't totally like the factions are a bit more different, and the way you play will be a bit different. So that's a good sort of thing we're adding on top of the normal RTS formula.
And now you guys going you mentioned previous to Kickstarter,
Right.
going
yeah.
That'll be
uh,
announced soon, hopefully. We're talking
yeah,
about doing that soon. We're quite excited about that. Sure.
good, yeah. And you guys have a imagine you guys have sort of a long-term plan. I think you always want to make sure, you have a long-term plan in case you get super successful, which is always the goal, right? And
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, well, we've realized that, after we make this game, we'll be sitting on a state-of-the-art RTS engine, right? Which can do
yeah,
anything because we've made it do the most demanding type of game, right?
Yeah.
Like, after that we could make RTSs for days, right? And we've got other like things in the queue, right? So, we're thinking, one thing that I've never seen done, I don't remember the last one even, right? But it's like a good RTS with skeletons in it, right? Like, where's my skeletons RTS? It just doesn't happen, right? And you could like imagine like you're raising all your skeletons from the dead, right? And then whenever one dies, anyone else can raise it from the dead, and you just have like hundreds of these like, you know, like a fantasy RTS, right? We could do like a modern warfare one, right? There's like
Hmm.
so much stuff that like we can use our engine to do because we'll have
Yeah.
all the tech to do it. Yeah.
Well, it's also, competing. Without throwing any other companies under the bus, I think, a lot of the big RTS companies, you're talking like teams of 70, 80 people, right? They're very expensive.
Yeah.
And I think I think a lot of people are saying, well, there's no money in RTS. I think, well, I think part of the problem is that you just have these gigantic teams,
True.
and now you can kind of do it, a little more nimble. And there's, I do feel like there's a lot of success. I still love playing RTS games. I guess, again, they're kind of, some of them are sort of few and far between. I think some of them are like, I think the last one I played was like the EA's Jurassic Park was kind of the last big one that I played. It's kind of like dinosaurs, grow dinosaurs, try to keep the park running, so it's RTS light, I would say. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of people out there, even a lot of people that I work with that yeah, love their RTS games.
Well,
But
that's the thing. Yeah, and that's why it's interesting to talk to you as a producer about like the viability of a new RTS. But what the feedback that I got from people, overwhelmingly so, was that they're dead keen for a new RTS, and it seems like the publishers just aren't interested.
yeah, I think sometimes, the publishers, they have these profit margins that are absolutely huge, right? Whereas a smaller company, you can make a smaller profit, everybody gets paid, everybody gets maybe a tiny bonus or something like that. And that's good, right? Like, I think for some of the companies, you want to make $1 bazillion. And so if you can be a little more, nimble and realistic on, what you're going to get, and if you have enough money to, put into the company that you can make games you guys want to work on, right? That's kind of the goal, and I think that's again, I think the RTS world where the billions to be made is when your game turns into an esport, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
StarCraft,
Well, we're not aiming for
that's
that,
the holy
right?
grail, right?
Yeah, but because we're a small team, right? Even like modest sales figures actually would be sort of, hopefully drowning in money because we just have a small team and
Yeah,
we've been
yeah,
spending our budget really efficiently. Sort of
yeah.
like I worked this out, right, without like naming numbers, but we're like at a fraction, like a small fraction of other AAA RTS titles. Like our budget is like it's a small amount, right? It's very
Oh, yeah.
small compared to what these other games cost to produce,
Oh,
right?
oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, God of War is a very different monster, but I mean, that's you're talking hundreds and hundreds of people, right? And
Yeah.
and they have to grow and then shrink, and but yeah, no, I love it. And so, are you guys well, I think the other nice thing is that Unity kind of backed off from taking more more cash
Taking more money.
from the
Yeah,
developers.
well, I mean, who knows what they'll try in 3 years' time? That's the
which is
problem.
yes, exactly. The biggest problem there was they showed us that they're allowed to change the rules after you're a few years into development. That's not
Yeah,
okay. If
no,
they
no,
made
no. I mean,
the rule like all titles started after this date, then I'd be cool with it. Like, I mean, that's fine. That's their right. But
yeah,
retrospective, no way.
yeah. That sucks
Yeah, it's
because
all
people have
about the
already done their
expectations,
financial
right?
modeling. Yeah,
Yeah, for us, it doesn't hurt that much, like the changes, because we're not a mobile game, right? So like a lot of those changes they would hurt the mobile games, but like for a retail game, the sort of the cost is like still not that significant. It doesn't really
yeah,
make any difference to us. But it's like you can no longer rely on the deal being the same. That's the problem, right? So that is a big cost, right? Well, we started with Unity, so we're gonna finish. That's
yeah.
all we're good. There you
I
go.
mean, we face this even with other software, like ZBrush for modeling is, they've gone now. They just were bought up by another company. They go to a subscription model.
Yeah,
We
right.
can we can no longer get upgrades, and we've got to move everything over. That we used to have perpetual licenses, and this
Yeah.
goes for software, right? It all goes to subscription now, and I get it. They need to make their money as well, and so they can do their improvements. So I'm not.
Everybody moved to Blender.
Yeah, everybody's gonna move to Blender, right? And so let me ask you another
Yeah.
question for you guys for distribution. Would you guys be,
Yeah.
looking at Steam?
Steam, yeah. Yeah, we got 80,000 wish lists on Steam right now.
Hey, well,
We're
I'll
in
get up there. I'll make another one.
Oh,
Yeah, that is actually
80,001.
yeah,
yeah,
80,001.
80,001. Let's go.
it's
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because we checked this. We're like in the top 400 most wishlisted games on Steam. We're like
Wow.
number 330, right? And we're in the top 250 most followed upcoming
Uh-huh.
games on Steam. So
Yeah.
so yeah, like
Well, yeah.
we're
I mean,
going up.
whenever you guys have links to your, Kickstarter and all that, just let me know. I have no problem, posting those in my networks, right? And like, kind of getting them out there. Sometimes.
Thanks. What do you think about the viability of a game like ours in our space making a million sales?
Well, boy, I think that again, because you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you guys aren't going to have a big marketing department, right? And so I
Yeah.
imagine part of that marketing is going to have to come from you guys. I always say going viral, but I think there's really another term for it. Is just kind of you have to kind of do your own organic marketing and get that out there. I
Yeah.
think that Steam wish list, I think that's one. But I mean, I think in this day and age, you use every channel you can, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You use everything, right? Like I think the demographic for RTS is. I think it's different than what it used to be, right? It used to be super hardcore gamers. They would play RTS. They were really tough to beat, right? They were really strong multiplayer people. I honestly think that's changed. I think that a lot of those people have played sort of RTS light on their phones. And I think, here's what I think. I think these people would like this game more than they know. And what I mean by that is because they played so many games like this on their phone, when they get into a bigger environment like this, where yeah, lots of units, you can got strategic zoom, zoom out, zoom in. Uh, I think there's a demographic out there that doesn't know that they would like this game, and I think that's trying to get them and find out like where are they, right? Like it could be
Hmm.
younger people on Instagram. Again, like if I were to kind of come at it, I guess I just kind of want to think of, forgive the cliche, but saying think outside the box of where you would traditionally, market your games to.
Yep.
If that makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
think Steam is one. I think a lot of the hardcore players you will find on Steam, they find an RTS, they want to play it. But I think I think also even to make the game enjoyable to them is to kind of get the newbies in there as well, right? It's fun in these games where people are like newbies come in, they try things that you're like, wow, we didn't even build that unit to do that, and now look at you, right? Like I think those are the people that have those really fun mistakes coming into play, and I think they make games way better just when you have such a different blend of players playing, if that makes sense.
But with the million sales thing, you see the barrier is going to actually be marketing.
I think it's getting out to that the people there. I think if you just slap a game up on Steam, that's one thing. It's again, I think you probably get double the amount that you have on the wish list there, right? 200,000. Getting up beyond that is going to be the challenge, right? Like you've got to find those players. You've got to say, hey, this is a game you didn't know you wanted to play, but boy, you want to play it, right? Whereas, like when I'm working at Sony, we have a huge marketing department. God of War is just slapped everywhere. We get Ben Stiller in to market it, right? Like there's like, we're able to do that so we
Yeah.
can we can reach that wider audience. I think the challenge is when you're kind of that indie game developer is getting out there. I do things like PAX though is I think PAX Gamescom is I've heard Gamescom is just like when I was working in Europe, they were like part of it because it is in Europe, right? but they were like, that's where you go. That's where if your game's not a Gamescom, no one knows about it. That was kind of their, their idea. Sanctuary is a game played on for control of areas on a Dyson Sphere between three different factions, and it's a multiplayer game, which is it's got all the elements of a successful RTS. My favorite faction is the Guard. I like the giant robots. I like the idea that they go sentient and and I also like the little backstory that you have with them that they're sort of protectors, the Dyson Sphere. So yeah, I think for all of that, that would be my favorite faction. Plus, I bet you they have some really cool, uh, experimental features.
Awesome. Thank you. Next one was, what do you think is the most exciting thing about Sanctuary?
What's exciting thing about Sanctuary? I mean, there's a lot there that is really cool. I really love the idea that, you can break through the world and you can break apart the world, again, just like having bridges fall down and maybe having some of your drones repair it, as a gameplay feature. If you look at any kind of like, World War II game or even in World War II, destroying bridges is that's a huge part of winning the battle, is people can't travel across it. So I really like that idea. I probably have just given away my strategy if I were to ever play the game, but
Okay, Mike, thank you heaps for joining us. That's been really great to chat. Thank you so much for taking the time to
yeah,
talk
no
to us.
problem. Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, it's fun. It's great seeing this. I can't wait till you guys have a demo where I can get some hands on.